Maccast, Sunday, October 31st, 2021. Hey, Mac Geeks, it's time for your Maccast, the show for Mac Geeks by Mac Geeks. I'm Adam, and this is a show where we discuss all things Macintosh. How you doing? Welcome back to the Maccast. Glad to be back here with you for another episode of Apple and Mac news, tips, tricks, information, all the goings on in the Apple community. I hope you are doing very, very well. I've had a pretty decent week. I guess it's Halloween as I record this, so many of you might be out getting goodies, trick-or-treating, putting on costumes. That's always fun. If not, hopefully you're having fun doing something else. But we have a lot of things to get into in this episode. I am looking over the show notes, and as you might be well aware, the new M1 MacBook Pros have hit the streets. So we're getting performance reviews, we're getting information, we're getting teardowns. We're going to dive in and talk about that stuff. We're going to talk about, that little thing called the notch that's on there. And, people are weighing in with their opinions on that. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Talk about maybe what's next for Apple Watch. Apple also did update all of the OS things. So we have some new OS updates to talk about and features, including a Mac update. Don't know if you've upgraded yet or not. I'll fill you in on whether I have and what my plans are. Then what might be next for iPhone. Also, what happens after M1 MacBook Pros? What's the next thing? And then a little further into the future, again, what's Apple up to next? So we'll get into all of that. And then we have some continued conversation about Apple product placements in Apple TV. I got some more great feedback from our community on that discussion we've been having. Also received feedback on the M1 MacBook Pros from a few listeners. So we'll talk to them about what they think about the M1s. And then I found a really cool feature in Photos that I had missed somehow, and I want to talk to you about that. And that'll kind of round out this episode of the Maccast. So it should be a good one. Before we dive in, though, I do want to take a quick moment and thank a show sponsor, and that is LinkedIn Jobs. Today, many small business owners are busier than ever. Time spent searching for and interviewing candidates can take time away from managing and growing a business, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs has made it easier to get the candidates worth interviewing faster, and best of all, it's free. We all, I think, know LinkedIn. If you don't, it is definitely the place for me to do all of my professional networking. It's the place where I go to, and it's also a great place, therefore, to find job candidates. I actually have LinkedIn Jobs to thank for my current job, and I can tell you for sure, my company takes full advantage of LinkedIn Jobs in their recruiting. They have hired amazing employees through LinkedIn. And you can do the same. You can create a job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. You can focus on candidates with the skills and experience you need, use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified people, then use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates worth interviewing faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Maccast. That's linkedin.com/Maccast to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And a big thank you to LinkedIn Jobs for their support of the show. Those new M1 MacBook Pros have shipped, the M1 Pro and the M1 Max models, and I have to tell you, I am jealous of some of you in the community because I'm getting emails from those of you who bought a new machine. Yeah, I have envy because as much as I love my 16-inch MacBook Pro, man, these machines are looking sweet, definitely awesome. And now that they're on the streets, I am getting even more lust because they are getting some stellar reviews. We're hearing a lot of great things about performance. And when we talk about really wanting to dig in deep on the tech behind anything really, but especially a Mac laptop or a new Mac, AnandTech is the place to go, and they have dug in on these new processors. I'll have a link to their full article. Like if you really want to geek out on the specs of processor technology, a lot of it, to be honest, is over my head. I did my best to parse it for you, but if you really want to drill in, go check out that AnandTech article. And like I said, the link will be in the show notes at maccast.com. But basically, they uncovered a few things, and I'm going to kind of hit some of the highlights, some of the things that interested me. And if you want to talk about it a little more, of course, you can send me your comments and your questions. But all in all, they confirmed that the cores in Apple's new M1 Pro and M1 Max processors are essentially very similar, if not identical, to the ones in the M1 processors. And that's really probably not too surprising, other than the fact that they thought maybe the new processors might be some sort of variant of the newer cores that are used in the A15 processor. But that's not the case. But still, Apple didn't just leave it at, using the same cores. They did a little bit of tweaking beyond just the number of cores, right? There's more cores for sure, but basically the same design. And beyond that, for the Pro processors, they definitely clocked them faster, up to 3.23 gigahertz on the peak performance. And not only that, for the 8 performance cores that are in those 10-core chips, what they really are is actually 2 4-core clusters, each with their own 12 megabytes of L2 cache. And this means that they can actually independently clock each one of those clusters. So depending upon your needs, they can throttle things up and down in terms of the performance, which is pretty cool. And then also on top of that, they did note, hey, the memory bandwidth, that's also 3 times faster. And that's really making a huge difference on the processor memory side of things. But then the piece notes that, really the beast, really the thing that puts these processors over the top is the increased GPU cores and performance. That's where these new Pro machines are really flexing and really showing off their muscle. And then finally, the piece concludes that the advances in these new chips bring performance to laptops that previously could not be believed. It didn't seem like it was possible. And Apple's new systems now not only outclass any competitors' laptop designs, but they're actually competing against some of the best desktop systems that are out there as well. And really, if you want to get beyond that, you're looking at moving into basically server-grade processors, right? These things are going to compete with the best of the best out there. And we're talking about, I have to remind myself of this, we're talking about notebooks here, right? That is just crazy, crazy, crazy. So very, very impressive. Apple's engineering team, their chip design team really deserve a lot of credit for really knocking this new processor and these new machines out of the park. They are super exciting. DaVinci Resolve added full support for the new processors, and the company now says that they run up to 5 times faster on Apple's new MacBook Pro models. So if you're using DaVinci Resolve, if you're doing those professional workflows, yeah, it's coming right at you right now. Really, really amazing. And then Andy Summerfield, who is the lead developer at Affinity Photo, a great photo editing application that a lot of people use on iOS and on the Mac, noted in a Twitter post that the M1 Max now has the fastest GPU performance of any GPU that they've ever tested with their own internal photo benchmarking tool. And that includes even beating out the dedicated Radeon Pro W6900X module that Apple has in the Mac Pro. That's that dedicated model. It's a US $6,000 graphics card that you can get for the Mac Pro. Yeah, the M1 Max is besting that in their performance benchmarks. And a lot of people, a lot of reviewers are doing real world benchmarks. And I saw a few YouTube videos. Basically, people are having a hard time finding a way to push this processor to the max, to get it to kick in on the fans, to get it to actually start stuttering when playing back multiple streams of video with multiple things happening in the background, multiple browser tabs. It is just insane. It is just, can you tell? It's just like a super exciting time to be an Apple and a Mac fan. I mean, we often get beat up over our processors and our technology and it being kind of mid-level and those sorts of things. And what's really amazing about these new machines too, I think, is that Apple really focused in on, and they told us they were going to be doing this a couple years back, but they really focused in on and listened to the pro market, and they targeted the hardware and the software combination at the kinds of workflows that people use their Macs for. So you're talking about developers and programmers. You're talking about audio production people. You're talking about video production people, special effects people. You're talking about, science and researchers and those folks. These machines are targeted at those markets and truly optimized to really perform in those areas. And it's so cool. So I know some of you, and we're going to hear from some of you a little bit later, have, got some of these machines are excited to start pushing them. And I will be interested to hear the results that you're having really in the real world, because as fun as it is to talk about all these benchmarks and those sorts of things, it really is more impressive to talk about when the rubber meets the road and when you find out that somebody is saving time in their workflow. Workflows are happening 2-3 times faster, and that means they're able to produce more, they're able to make more money. All those things are really, really great. And then kind of the last thing to talk about is maybe some of the internals. iFixit, of course, performed their teardown on these models and found a few interesting things. Not a lot of huge changes beyond, things that are obvious, like the new processors and those sorts of things. But one nice thing that they found was that the batteries now have pull tabs. There's actually pull tabs for the battery adhesive, meaning that they're much easier to remove. Not only that, the battery is now not trapped underneath the logic board. So you basically are going to have an easier time doing aftermarket or third-party battery replacements when you get to that point and when you need to. They also did notice that there's about 100%, they say 100% more slack in the display flex cable, which means that they're going to be less likely or less prone to breakage over time. And that's something previous generations of laptops had kind of suffered from. So some good news on the repairability front. Of course, in terms of doing upgrades, everything's, soldered in, the RAM, the storage, and all that stuff. So it still doesn't get a great repairability score from iFixit, but it's nice to know that, some of the parts and components that you can replace, Apple has done a little bit of engineering on to make that whole process a little bit easier. But overall, these machines are getting great reviews. I'm in love with them, if you can't tell, and I think our community is falling in love with them very, very quickly. Of course, it's all not 100% rosy out there. There is a few people who are maybe not so thrilled or not so excited about one design decision Apple made. And yes, of course, I'm talking about the notch. Quinn Nelson from Snazzy Labs actually posted a video on Twitter showing how currently in some apps, the menu bar items, and I think he was using iStat menus, menu bar items, if they get long, and this was something a lot of people worried about, myself included, when I first saw the notch, if they get long, items can actually slide under the notch and be obscured. And they're actually behind the camera housing, and you can, technically click on them, even though you can't really see what's going on there. Now, this isn't a massive issue. It looks bad in a YouTube video, I'll have to admit, but Apple does offer a compatibility mode right now that developers can enable via Xcode to kind of change the active area of the display to avoid the camera housing. So developers just need to get in there and start updating their apps. Obviously, it might take a little while before developers get that update and that new mode turned on. So until then, with the latest version of macOS Monterey, which was released, there is a way for you to enable compatibility mode yourself. So you can actually go into the Finder, select the app, choose File, Get Info, or hit Command-I, and then in the info pane, you can find and check on the option for Scale to Fit Below Built-in Camera. And that will scale everything in the interface down basically to the original size of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, because the new screen is taller, right? It's 16.2 inches technically. So the menu bar has actually been raised up. So it'll actually pull it out of that area and get it so that you can access it. Now, unfortunately, in this compatibility mode, it does scale everything down. So you'll get wider bezels on the left and right as well, which some people have complained about, but it's really just a stopgap measure until developers update their apps. And once developers do update their apps, you will not see this option in the Finder for those apps. And a couple of people noted that if you do turn this on and you have that app open in the background, it basically will do that scaling for everything until you actually quit that app. So just be aware of that as well. But overall, Apple calls the notch design, quote unquote, a really smart way to give you more space for your content because they made the display taller and left the usable display space the same. So in their minds, it's really a great design. And of course, the debate in the community so far has been a little bit mixed. I think in general, most people are feeling they're okay with the notch. I think we've come to the realization that this is sort of an Apple thing. And actually, that's one thing that was brought up as well. And, I don't know, maybe this is something that goes into Apple's decision for making a notch, but some people are saying that it is for recognition. Like when you see the screen and it has that notch in it, it's an iPhone screen or it's an Apple screen. And maybe that is really a thing. I don't really think it is. I think they just figured it was a good, again, design decision to kind of give you more usable area and then put the menu system up where they can have the camera and give you a little more screen real estate. So that's how Apple's positioning it. Whether we want to believe them or not is a thing. But, ultimately in the community, it feels like most people aren't really too bothered by the notch. If you absolutely are, though, as you might imagine, there are already emerging third-party apps that will help you essentially hide the notch. There's one called Top Notch. I will have a link to it in the show notes at maccast.com. And basically, it makes the desktop black at the top in the area under the menu bar, and then it just simply blends in with your display. So you don't even notice that the notch is there at all. Of course, you're going to get what looks like a little bit wider bezel, or really just an extension of a black menu bar. So not too bad. It actually looks fairly decent. So you can go that route if you really, really hate it. But, like I said, I look at it, it doesn't really bother me. And I think developers are going to adjust their apps and their user interfaces to account for it. I even have a feeling, like we've seen with the notch on the iPhone, there might even be some clever uses of those notch areas in different apps, or non-notch areas, I guess I should say. So it'll be interesting to see what developers do with that. And I kind of look forward to it. Digitimes is reporting that Apple is lining up suppliers for components for the next version of the Apple Watch, presumably going to be named the Series 8. Among the sensors that Apple is looking into, they say they are looking at short wavelength infrared sensors that would potentially enable the device to measure blood glucose levels. In the past, the Wall Street Journal has reported that blood glucose capabilities is one of the health features that Apple has been pursuing for the Apple Watch. We, as a matter of fact, have been talking about it as a rumor almost since, I would imagine, the first day or first time we heard about Apple doing an Apple Watch. It feels like something that just makes sense. The challenge is likely getting something that is non-invasive and that can integrate into the watch. It's a pretty small space. And also, I would imagine something that meets Apple's standards for quality and, more importantly, probably accuracy of the health information. I also know in the past we've talked about that FDA approval might be required or might be a thing, and Apple has generally tried to avoid any kind of FDA requirements for the Apple Watch when it comes to health devices. So I don't know if that will be a thing that they can necessarily work around, but supposedly that's the big new feature they are working on for the next generation of Apple Watch. Meanwhile, the current generation of Apple Watch, the Series 7, has been torn apart by the folks at iFixit, and despite the similarities in outward appearance to the Series 6, beyond that slightly larger display and a little bit larger millimeter sizes, they did find a couple of other new surprises on the inside. The new watch has given up the bracket where the diagnostic port once lived. And you might be going, what diagnostic port? We don't talk about it too often, but for, I think, since the original Apple Watch, I'd have to go back and see when it was added. But forever, the Apple Watch has had under one of the band connectors, I think it's the one at the bottom of the watch, a little secret diagnostic port, and it's used in the factory when the watches are being set up and ready for shipment. It's also used by repair technicians for doing diagnostics on the Apple Watch. That has gone away with the latest version, and so they don't need those internal components for that anymore. So they get a little bit more space back on the inside, and Apple is now reportedly using a high-frequency wireless interface to replace that, so that's not in there. They also did note that the new display has one less flex cable. They ditched the one for the touch sensor layer, and that's probably because the new display uses a touch-integrated OLED panel, or what's known as a on-cell touch. And so speculation is that this makes it a little bit trickier for these new displays in development, and that coupled with the increased edge-to-edge design, that kind of wraparound design of the display, those two things probably led to some of the launch delays. And I think we had heard earlier in the supply chain that Apple was struggling with some of the displays for the new Apple Watch. So that probably delayed the launch a little bit. And they say even though the battery life did not change in terms of the spec, they did find slightly larger batteries. They're slightly wider in dimension than last year's and slightly higher capacities and densities than last year's batteries. Although, again, you're going to get the same battery life. And another interesting thing they found out is that you can swap parts like batteries from older models into these new models. So like take an S6 battery or a Series 6 battery rather and put it in a Series 7 and it will work. It's not an issue. And that means potentially good news for the repairability and availability of parts down the road. So it should be fairly easy to get kind of existing parts and put those in the new Apple Watch. So some good news on that front. Apple sent out an OS update for all of the iThings this week. I kind of need and again, this is another thing, maybe I'll throw this out to you in the community. We need another thing to call all of what used to just be iOS devices, right? We used to just have macOS and iOS, but now that all of the iThings, and they're not even all iThings anymore because we have HomePods, Apple TVs, and Apple Watches, but all of those things that run kind of the variants, or I guess I should say the ancestors of iOS. What do we call all those things collectively? I'm just going to call them iThings for right now, but basically iOS 15.1, iPadOS 15.1, tvOS 15.1, HomePodOS 15.1, and watchOS 8 Like the odd man out. Poor watchOS. They're only at 8. All those updates were released this week, and even though it's just a 0.1 update, they bring some pretty cool new features to our devices. The biggest news, and in my mind at least, for what this update brings to all of these things is SharePlay. So we finally have SharePlay. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to quote unquote play with it. This is the feature where you can use a FaceTime call or use FaceTime to share audio. So play and listen to audio with someone else over a FaceTime call. You can do screen sharing. You can do video sharing. You can play games through FaceTime, so share games and all that sort of stuff. It looks like a lot of fun, and developers are starting to add support for third-party apps. I think it's going to be something that is going to be leveraged pretty well. Some of your favorite video apps, I know Paramount Plus has added support. Of course, Apple TV Plus has support for it. Hopefully, HBO Max will at some point. Who knows if Netflix will? We have to wait and see. And it's not clear either yet if every one of those services is going to require both people to have a subscription. If you're going to say watch a video with someone over a FaceTime call. Apparently also it has audio detection, so if you talk while the movie is talking, it will automatically lower the audio so you can hear the person that you're talking to. So that may or may not be a good thing depending upon how you feel about talking during movies, but hey, it's in there. So we can watch movies together and listen to music and things remotely through FaceTime calls, and I think it's going to be really, really great. The biggest thing in my mind, and probably the feature I'll use the most, is actually the screen sharing to remotely help friends and family when, especially, they have trouble with their iOS devices. That's always been tricky to do because we haven't had really good screen sharing tools for that. You can't take control of someone else's screen yet. You can just view it, but hey, we're getting there. It's progress. So that's really cool. That's out with the new 15.1 updates. A few other highlights to point out. If you have a HomePod or a HomePod Mini, this update brings lossless audio and Dolby Atmos spatial audio to those products. Now, both the full-size HomePod and the HomePod Mini get lossless audio support, but the spatial audio is limited to the full-sized HomePod only, or a pair of HomePod Minis when they're connected to an Apple TV 4K. Now, an interesting thing about that is that 9to5Mac noticed that if you have a stereo pair of HomePod Minis and you try to play spatial audio through Apple Music, it doesn't work. But if you take that pair and connect it to a 4K Apple TV, then you do get spatial audio support. So, even though you're not watching video content, you can play spatial audio music. It just has to be paired up with an Apple TV 4K. So I'm not sure what that is all about or why that limit or if that's a bug. They weren't really sure either, but it's worth noting if you have a pair of HomePod Minis and you want to get that spatial audio support. Now, to enable these features on your HomePod, you have to go into the Home app. You have to tap on the Home icon and then choose Home Settings, and then under the People section, select your profile. So it does look like you can enable lossless audio support and Atmos support on a user-by-user basis in your HomePod. And then once you select the profile, under Media, you select Apple Music, and then you'll see the toggles and options for Dolby Atmos and lossless audio, and you can turn them on or off. And so I'm guessing on the lossless front, you can turn that on or off to kind of save bandwidth on your home Wi-Fi plan, right? So I thought about immediately turning on and then realized that, I don't notice all that much with lossless or not lossless, and so I'd rather just save the bandwidth on my home network and made that call. But I have plenty of bandwidth. I could still do it, but I figured why spend the extra bits just for something that I'm probably not going to really be able to hear. But some people are probably going to really like that feature. So you do have to turn it on. It seemed like the Atmos support was turned on by default, but the lossless audio, you actually do have to go in and turn that on. one side note related to HomePod Minis, Apple announced the new colors at their last event, and it said that they were coming in November. They didn't give us a hard timeline. Mark Gurman did come out this week and say he thinks that the HomePod Minis with colors are going to be available starting in the first week of November. So probably by the time you hear this podcast, those might be available to order on Apple's online store. In watchOS 8, Apple says they added enhanced fall detection algorithms, support for the COVID-19 vaccination card in the Wallet app, and that actually translates over to iOS as well, and support for the new Group Fitness Plus workouts where you can work out with a friend. That's actually another feature of SharePlay, so you can do your Fitness Plus workouts together as well. And then finally, not directly related to the iThing updates, but just something of note, especially for our international listeners. Apple One Premier plans are coming to 17 new countries. It looks like they're going to be arriving on November 3rd. Apple is expanding that program into new countries. So with Premier, you get music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, iCloud storage with 2 terabytes, and Fitness Plus. Also, normally you would get News Plus, but these countries don't offer the News Plus service yet, so they won't have that feature baked in. And the countries that are getting the new access to the new service are Austria, Brazil, Colombia, France, Germany, Indonesia, Ireland, Italy, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Portugal, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Switzerland, and the UAE. So look forward to that. If you've been waiting for that to come to your country, it will be available in those places November 3rd. And Apple delivered more than just an up-to-date to the iThing OSs. They also launched Mac OS Monterey. It is here now, and you can download it and update your Mac. I personally haven't done it yet because I need to test things out and make sure that I'm going to be able to produce this podcast for you. So as far as I know, I don't think there's too many compatibility issues. As far as which Macs can run the new version of the operating system, it's pretty much any Mac 2015 or later. There are some earlier models, like I think some 2014 models of Mac Minis. Basically, if you were running Catalina, you're very likely going to be able to just upgrade to Mac OS Monterey when you're ready to do so. Some of the highlights of new features: it does bring support for the new focus modes that we have on iOS. It brings over live text and the quick note feature. SharePlay and Universal Control are coming soon. I don't think they are available now. Safari has been restored to its separate original tab design by default, although you can go in and change it to the new compact layout. So you remember that was kind of big controversy. A lot of people really hated a lot of the new updates to Safari, so Apple has kind of rolled those back and will let you turn those on at your leisure. And it also brings, macOS on Monterey also brings Share With You support. So this is the stuff when someone shares audio or video, photos, links, podcasts, music in messages with you. Those will show up in a Shared With You section in their respective apps. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. My family shares things with me, especially photos and like music they think I might like. And to have that just show up in Music app is really great because I can see things not only my family recommended, but also just friends as well. So I find it very, very convenient, and I'm liking that feature. It's great that it's going to be available now on the Mac as well. Also, a big update, Shortcuts is finally on the Mac, so we can have automation back on the Mac. I guess we still had Automator, but to be able to have your shortcuts and the shortcuts interface and everything back on the Mac, that is really, really cool. And then another feature that I can't believe it's taken this long for us to get here is that you can now AirPlay from an iOS device to your Mac, both video and screen sharing AirPlay as well as audio. So you can use your Mac as an AirPlay speaker if you really want to do that. So some great new things in Mac OS Monterey. Like I said, I have not personally upgraded yet, so I haven't had a chance to play around with everything yet. But when I do, I, of course, will be sharing my thoughts and opinions with you. I know many of you in the community have updated already, so I would love to hear your update experiences, what you're liking, maybe what you're not liking so much. If you've run into any issues or problems that you think the community might want to know about, always share those with us, and we'll pass them along. That's a great way for all of us to learn and maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that might crop up when you're doing an update to a new operating system. Like I said, so far, I've heard that this one's pretty smooth. I don't think there's a lot of changes, big changes from Mac OS Catalina. So if you're running that, I would expect a pretty smooth upgrade cycle. But again, share your thoughts and opinions with us. Shoot me an email, send me an audio comment, maccast@gmail.com. I think we already talked about some of the rumors for the next kind of entry-level iPhone updates. We're expecting Apple to do something with the iPhone SE. That update is still coming. The common thought in the community right now feels like sometime in 2022, probably the first half of the year, we are going to get an iPhone SE update. Display analyst Ross Young thinks that he has a few more details on what that display will be. He said recently that he thinks the new device is going to be called the SE Plus, although it's not going to have a larger size screen, which is historically how Apple has used the Plus naming, right? It was the larger display. He thinks it's still going to have the same 4.7-inch display as it has all along, since it was kind of based on the iPhone 8 design. But then, as we've been hearing, Apple will add 5G to it. We are also expecting them to add the latest A15 processor. So it should be a really nice upgrade, but the screen is basically remaining the same, still an LCD at the same size. We're still expecting it to have a built-in Touch ID and not Face ID, so it will definitely still be that entry-level model. Ross Young also says that there will be an iPhone SE 3 update, and when Apple does that update, they're going to move to a larger, maybe 5.7-inch or 6.1-inch display. That's probably when they will be also dumping the home button for Touch ID on the side button. But he does say that his sources are indicating that that launch has been pushed to sometime in 2024. So I'm not sure why 2 years out after updating the SE model, but the SEs do kind of get less frequent updates, so that makes a little bit of sense. We'll have to wait and see what Apple does, but that's what might be next for the iPhone SE. And then what's next for Apple Silicon? You might be thinking Mac Pro, and that's definitely on the horizon, but what it looks like we're hearing about more is that update to the 27-inch iMac. And it's not really clear if it's just going to be a 27-inch iMac update or an iMac Pro. I'm going to guess that Apple does both, and they might have like an M1 version of the iMac and then an iMac Pro with M1X or M1 Pro, and M1 Max processors. But what we are hearing, we got some information through a tweet from the Apple leaker Dylan DKT. Again, I think that's how you pronounce that. I don't think it's Dylan. I don't think that's right. So I'm just going to say Dylan DKT. And he is saying that the iMac update will feature a mini LED ProMotion display on the 27-inch model. Some have actually questioned, and I think this is a valid comment, why wouldn't Apple bump up, especially if it was a Pro model, to a slightly larger display, something like a 30 or a 32-inch? That would be nice to see them do. We've had the 24 or the 21, 27-inch sizes for a long time. They did bump up from 21.5 to 24, so why not bump up on the 27-inch side? I would like to see them do that, but right now the rumors are kind of indicating it's still going to be a 27-inch display. The design, he says, will be similar to the 24-inch iMac, and he says the Pro Display XDR, although those designs in my mind are somewhat different. I'm going to think it's going to be more toward the 24-inch iMac, probably just in muted colors like space gray and silver. And he does say that it will have black bezels and not white bezels. So definitely more on that pro side of the styling. The base model will have a configuration of 16 gigabytes of RAM and a 512 gigabyte SSD. They will use the M1 Pro and the M1 Max chips from the latest MacBook Pro updates. They will have an HDMI port, an SD card slot, and USB-C Thunderbolt ports, and an option for Ethernet through the MagSafe charging brick, just like the 24-inch iMac. He also claimed that Face ID was tested for the new iMac, but not confirmed. I'm going to guess that Apple's not going to go with Face ID. Apple executives recently said in an interview that they basically don't see Face ID as a feature for the Mac because they say you already have the keyboard input. Your hands are already on the keyboard, and it just makes sense for Touch ID to be there and for everything to be in that configuration. I think there's a lot of people that would disagree. It would be nice to just sit down at your Mac or just be opening up your Mac display and be automatically logged in. It's great for those of us who have Apple Watch that already does that. And for people who maybe don't have Apple Watch, Face ID could be the same experience, and it's pretty magical. So, I think they're maybe fudging a little bit. I'm not really sure why they don't want to bring Face ID to the Mac, but according to them, it's because it's not really necessary. The starting price point for the new iMac Pro, he says somewhere around $2,000. So that doesn't really sound like a Pro, which is why I kind of feel like maybe they'll do an M1 version of the 27-inch iMac at a starting price around $2,000 and then have some Pro offerings. It could just be a price configuration thing too. They may stick with a single branding and then just offer different levels of processor depending upon your needs. I think that'd be a great way to handle it. But we are expecting an iMac update sometime in early 2022. I would, again, think it would happen hopefully in the first half. Apple, it's their last year to do the transition, and then I think toward the end of the year, we'll see, updated versions of maybe the original M1 Mac models as well as the release of the Mac Pro updates, which, as we talked about on the last episode of the MacCast, are going to be absolutely amazing. And then on the iMac front this week, another thing that happened is Apple apparently has discontinued the Intel 21.5-inch iMac. So now you just have the 24-inch M1 models as the entry-level iMacs. And then finally in the news for this week, we got a little more information on what Apple's plans for their mixed reality headset AR/VR glasses are going to be from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. He said in a recent newsletter that we might see this product in 2022. He claims it will be a, quote, pricey device with advanced chips, displays, sensors, and avatar-based features. Earlier reports had indicated that it would have a hefty price tag. Apple's first generation of their AR/VR headset coming in somewhere around $3,000 US. So it's definitely going to be kind of an early adopter thing. I don't see Apple selling a ton of them. I mean, they're going to sell well, but again, at that price point, you have to be really into being an early adopter of that technology. He seems to think that the device will offer a mix of augmented reality and virtual reality experiences, with the VR experiences probably being focused mostly on gaming. He says, quote, it'll handle games in high quality virtual reality. He also alludes to a future product where Apple would focus purely on a set of AR-only glasses and an augmented reality experience. And that was something Tim Cook was very excited about as being something that would be in the future. So Apple ultimately looking to deliver, I think, just a simple AR experience with simple, lightweight glasses. The first product is expected to be more like the traditional VR goggles that we've seen on the market, although we have been hearing all these rumors that Apple is really focusing on the design and the materials, trying to get it as light and as comfortable as possible. So we might see that in 2022. I would imagine that would be some sort of fall announcement late in the year, and obviously it's early days, so it could get delayed. It could not even happen, but interesting to think about what the next generation thing's going to be. I think really the key to it is Apple focusing on the experience and the use cases, and I think that's really more where the challenge is. We have a lot of this technology out there. Right now, it's really just used for games, and I think Apple wants to take it to the next level, and I'm super excited to see what they deliver. But with that is going to do it for the news for this week. Before we move on, I do want to take a moment and thank a couple of show sponsors, starting with Uncommon Goods. Look, if you're on a mission to be the best gift giver ever this year, it's never too early to start crossing things off your list. Whether you're shopping for your mom, your dad, teenagers, in-laws, or your best friends, Uncommon Goods makes it easy to find remarkable and truly original gifts for anyone. And I have to tell you, I have some folks on my list, my mom specifically, who are a little bit tricky to shop for. And I went on Uncommon Goods, and I found a number of items that I have sort of stashed away that I'm probably going to be sending her this year. She likes gardening, and there are a lot of great gardening gifts and unusual items, and they're really unique and are not going to be something people have already. I also went on there and got a little something for myself. 59parks.net has done these amazing illustrations of all of the national parks, and they created a series for Field Notes created a series called the National Park Series with these illustrations on the front. So I got a bunch of these little notebooks. I'm constantly, as you might imagine, taking notes, and I like to have physical notes and things to write on here at my desk. So I've got a great set and series of those thanks to Uncommon Goods. And Uncommon Goods wants your holiday season to be stress-free, so check out their selection of thousands of items today. Who knows what holiday shopping will look like this season, and the unique gifts at Uncommon Goods can sell out fast, so shop now and take care of it early. That's really good advice. No matter what the folks you are shopping for are into, Uncommon Goods has the perfect gift. From art to jewelry to kitchen, home, and bar, Uncommon Goods has something for everyone. And it's not just the same lackluster gifts you can find anywhere. Uncommon Goods looks for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the U.S. They have the most meaningful, out-of-the-ordinary gifts anywhere. And with every purchase you make on Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a non-profit partner of your choice. I loved this part of the checkout experience. I was able to do a donation to a charity that meant something to me. They give you an offer of a bunch of great partners, and they've donated more than $2.5 million to date. So to get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/Maccast. That's uncommongoods.com/Maccast for 15% off, and don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. And a big thank you to Uncommon Goods for their support of the podcast. I'd also like to thank my sponsor, SimpliSafe. There's big news from my favorite home security company. SimpliSafe just launched their new wireless outdoor security camera. That's right, SimpliSafe, the system that U.S. News and World Report names Best Home Security System of 2021, just got even better. This brand new outdoor security camera is engineered with all the advanced tech and security features you want and need to keep you and your family safe. I love my SimpliSafe system, and I have to say the expandability and flexibility is a big part of that. I got all of the parts and pieces I needed to do my setup initially, and that setup was super easy, and now I have the options to expand that, and a wireless outdoor security camera would make my system even better. This new wireless outdoor security camera has an ultra-wide 140-degree field of view, so you can keep watch over your entire yard. It has 1080p HD resolution with an 8 times zoom. That means you can zoom in and clearly see things like faces and license plates to capture critical evidence. It also has a built-in spotlight with color night vision, so you can keep an eye on what's going on day and night. And it's super simple to set up, just like everything else in the Simply Safe system. Usually just takes minutes. And it has an easy-to-remove rechargeable battery, so it doesn't need an outlet, meaning it can go anywhere on your property. This camera has it all, and it integrates with your Simply Safe home security system, extending its protection to the outside. Together, it means every door, window, and room is protected, and now your property will be too. To learn more about the exciting new Simply Safe wireless outdoor security camera, visit simplysafe.com/maccast. What's more, Simply Safe is celebrating this new camera by offering 20% off your entire new system and your first month of monitoring service free when you enroll in interactive monitoring. Again, that's simplysafe.com/maccast, simplysafe.com/maccast, and a big thank you to Simply Safe for their support of the show. I want to continue for a little bit our discussion about Apple TV Plus shows and how Apple has been doing product placements. This all started with an email that I received from a listener, Josh, who kind of felt like maybe Apple was being a little bit heavy-handed, at least in some of their shows, with this content. And I kind of gave my opinions on it. You know, I kind of feel like Apple TV Plus is Apple's service, and so it makes sense that really the product placements that you're going to see highlighted in their shows, when appropriate, those are going to be Apple devices, right? iPhones, iPads, Apple software and services like iCloud and FaceTime and all those sorts of things. And, I feel like a lot of shows, especially in a modern setting, show people using the kinds of products that they use. And if you go out and about on the street, I don't know about you, but daily, and maybe it's just because I'm an Apple fan that I notice this stuff more, but I notice people using iPhones, or when they're using an Android phone, or when they're using certain kinds of headphones, be it Sony headphones, or, hey, those are a pair of AirPod Maxes, or those are AirPod Pros, or those sorts of things. And I don't find that unusual necessarily or jarring. Now, the question and the debate we've been having is Apple being a lot more deliberate? I think in terms of just showing technology, it didn't feel to me like they were showing technology more than I would necessarily see on any show. It just happened to be that when they showed technology, it was Apple technology. And I just kind of bought into that because it's Apple TV Plus. And that was just my opinion. And I got a lot of feedback. There were a lot of you who agreed with me. There were some folks who still felt Apple was being a little bit heavy-handed. And Josh wrote back in to thank us for kind of having the conversation, but then also pointed me to a Wall Street Journal YouTube video, and I will link to this in the show notes at maccast.com because it's really cool, where I guess they were having the same kind of debate or discussion, or at least a reporter there was wondering about this as well. He went deeper than I think any of us ever would, and actually analyzed 704 episodes of various Apple TV Plus shows for Apple product placements. Actually, cataloged it, put it in a spreadsheet. So he looked at Ted Lasso, The Morning Show, Trying, Defending Jacob, and Mythic Quest. So those 5 shows, and 704 episodes. And he noted in those 704 episodes, there were 300 iPhone product placements, 120 MacBook placements, and that's like MacBook Airs, MacBook Pro, any model MacBook, basically any Apple notebook, and then 40 pairs of AirPods shown. And in just one episode of Ted Lasso, he noted that the rate of Apple products shown was 1.24 Apple products per minute, basically. So when you run the numbers that way, yeah, it does sound a little crazy. And those numbers also don't even include other what you would consider to be kind of product placements, and those are things like the sounds, the alert sounds, the ringtones that were very distinctively Apple. You hear those things. They're not necessarily part of the dialogue, but they are used. And there's also just mentions of Apple products that are used as plot devices to kind of drive the technology forward. Like I think in one episode of Ted Lasso, Coach Beard says, "Hey, we're looking at sharing an iCloud account," or people will say, "Hey, I'll FaceTime you later," or they bring up the words FaceTime or specific Apple products in the dialogue. And so those are other kinds of placements. And so we're just talking about like the analysis, these 704 episodes and 300 iPhones, 120 MacBooks, 40 pairs of AirPods. Those were the things that were actually shown on screen. Now, to be fair, like one scene of Ted Lasso was, reporters all had their phones up on a press conference table recording audio, and of course they were all iPhones, right? So there's 30 iPhones on the table, and that counts as 30, I guess. But yeah, again, these things aren't anything that I would see as egregious, because if you watch a press conference, that is something reporters do now, is they record, using their phones. So yeah, it was interesting to see, but looking at those raw numbers, it does make it seem like there's a lot of placements, but I wonder if it's really not indicative of the kinds of frequency that we would see these devices in our daily lives. I'd like to kind of see that comparison and, spend a week walking around. How many iPhones do you see? How many sets of AirPods do you see? How many Apple Watches do you see? I see people, looking at their Apple Watches all the time, or using them in the grocery store for checkout or whatever it might be. So, would it be the same? Probably not. But again, these are TV shows. And so that's sort of how I'm thinking about it. But I definitely want to thank Josh for sharing that with me. And also, there are other folks in the community who are continuing to weigh in on this topic. So, I wanted to share with you some thoughts from Ivan, who chimed in on this week as well.
Hi, Adam. This is Ivan from Michigan. I had a few comments to make. First of all, I want to say I enjoy your show. I'm a long-term listener, but I have some definite comments to make about Apple and their products and their releases. For one, I don't apologize for Apple. I'm a long-term Apple user, and I'm an Apple stockholder, but I don't take and make excuses for Apple. But Apple has a right, they have a right to show their products on their movies and productions and TV shows the same way anyone else shows their products. If they sponsor a program, they're going to show their name and logo, whether it's General Motors, whether it's IBM, whether it's Nike or whoever. They're going to show their logo. Stadium named after somebody, they're going to show their logo. So when Apple finances movies, TV shows at millions and millions of dollars, I don't understand not expecting for them to show their products. They would be dumb to not show their products. They have a right to show their products and an expectation. Would you rather for them to show someone else's products? Doesn't make any sense.
Hey, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, we're not expecting Apple to be featuring, IBM PCs or Android phones a lot on their shows, although they do. As noted in the last episode, I think one of the things that they try to avoid is having bad characters or characters that would basically reflect badly on their brand be using or being shown holding Apple devices. And as a matter of fact, I think in the Wall Street Journal video, they point out that Joe in Mythic Quest, who's, I wouldn't say she's a villain, but she's maybe not the most socially responsible person, or the person that would be held to the highest regard in a lot of people's lives. She is never shown. She has a MacBook, but the logo is always covered up. So it's an interesting thing that they do. They kind of make sure that when the branding is shown in a positive light. And I think that's obviously their prerogative as well. And, why wouldn't you do that? So I agree with a few of your thoughts and comments there. And I definitely thank you for sending those in. Obviously, this topic seems to have resonated with our community, and I appreciate everybody who has chimed in on this. now that the new MacBook Pros are out on the streets, like I said, I've heard from a number of you who have either had a chance to go see one in person or actually received one of these things. You bought one. And as you might imagine, we are super excited. I'm super excited in the community to actually hear about these things firsthand from MacCast listeners. And so I did get some comments this week that I wanted to share with you and wanted to talk about a little bit. Let's start off with Anthony. Here's what he had to say.
Hi, Adam. So my new 16-inch MacBook Pro M1 Max arrived, and I love it. Looks-wise, it's far superior to the 2018 15-inch MacBook Pro that it replaced, and is truly a wonder to behold. I much prefer the chunkier look. It just feels solid and professional. I'm not fussed about the new ports. I don't really use them, but the MagSafe's return is wondrous, and it should never have been removed at all. Performance-wise, it totally blows my old i7 out of the water, and it's just screaming fast in Lightroom and especially in Final Cut Pro. The screen is night and day difference when I sit the two machines side by side. The new tones and the depth of the blacks is just wonderful. There's a few teething problems though. That is, well, the notch. I love the look of the notch, and it's going to be great once the issues are resolved, but right now it's a pain. My iStat menus are used fully, and the icons go pretty much all the way across the screen, so imagine my surprise when a few were missing, except they're not really missing at all. I know they're either behind or under the notch. How is this even possible? Is the area behind the notch a live area? I'm guessing that iStat menus are working on a fix. Hopefully that'll be out soon. But when it is out, will I have enough room for all of my little icons at the top? Because I pretty much fill the top bar on a normal screen. Indeed, apart from these initial niggles, which will get sorted, the new machine is better in every way but one. Dare I say it? The touch bar. I get it that people miss their function keys, and I agree that they should be there. But why is this a case of either one or the other? Why can't we have both? I'm already missing the touch bar greatly, and I keep going to it for things and only to find it's not there anymore. Like the smooth volume control, the sliding timeline on a video, or just something simple like the notification pointing to the Touch ID so I know how much I'm spending on Apple Pay, and so many more. I'm sure that I'll eventually forget it, but I do lament its passing and wonder why it was not only kept, but also rolled out across the range. Indeed, I think that this was its undoing. It's not on the MacBook Air, not on the iMac, not on external keyboards, etc. I think had it been deployed across the range, then developers would have taken to it more seriously and invested in it. I can only wonder at what it might have been. We will, certainly I will miss you, Touch Bar, and may you rest in peace. And maybe one day you'll come back as a double thickness Touch Bar with even more functionality. We shall see. Thanks, Adam, for all you do. Love the podcast, and all the best for the future, sir. Take care. Bye.
Hey, Anthony, thank you. Thank you for that feedback and firsthand account of kind of first impressions of the new machine. I am glad to hear that you're loving it. I am envious of the performance, as you might imagine, and some of the updates. Very interesting to hear your comments on the touch bar. I think you are absolutely the first person I have heard from in the community who has come out in support of the touch bar. I think a lot of us are probably like myself, a little bit of on the fence about it. There are features of the touch bar that I do like. Some of the controls that you mentioned, like the volume controls and those things, are nice. Having that touch stuff, having little alerts and interface items come up there from time to time. I think the problems with the touch bar for me were that I just never really found it super useful in terms of a lot of the apps that I used on a daily basis. And more often than not, I think, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I would find myself accidentally pressing or accessing functions on the touch bar, and it became more of an annoyance and a nuisance on a day-to-day basis than a help for me. But it sounds like you got a lot of utility and use out of it, and I think you're right, too. I'm not sure that Apple gave it a fair shake by not rolling it out across the line and making it available. It kind of made it this sort of weird pro feature that developers would have to support, but it really didn't have a wide appeal, especially to developers. Like, why use it if, only a subset of your users are going to be able to take advantage of that? It's extra development time, it's extra work, and those sorts of things. And maybe that's another reason why it's going away. I appreciate having the physical function keys back. If we had both, that may have solved my problem. That's an interesting thing too. That the keyboard would be a little bit taller. Maybe the trackpad would have to be a little bit smaller. Although the trackpad is massive on my MacBook Pro, so I think losing a half height function key size level of that space wouldn't be that big of a deal, and having the function keys at the top would probably have solved the problem of missed touches on the touch bar. Right, it could be above and even go wider because you could keep the physical escape key and even extend the touch bar a little bit further. So that's interesting to think about. So again, I appreciate the comments because you gave me some things to think about, some things I hadn't thought about with the touch bar. I'm sorry that it has gone away for you, but I think a lot of the rest of the community is going to be kind of celebrating its demise, or that's the way it feels at least. Maybe I'm wrong. Are there more touch bar supporters out there? And can you chime in with your solidarity for Anthony and the touch bar? I look forward to hearing from you. Also this week, I might as well have this guy be a co-host on the Maccast. It feels like Gary chimes in quite a bit, and as you might imagine this week, Gary had some things to say about the new M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros.
Hey Adam, Gary. I just visited the Apple Store because I really wanted to see these new MacBook Pros for myself, kind of hold them, see what's going on. I mean, everyone's talking about how amazing they are, so it's pretty much, hard not to believe that they're amazing since everyone's saying it. I did want to check out this new form factor because it kind of looked to me online like kind of chunky and a little bit heavier, and I'm like, that doesn't really appeal to me. But in person, it feels amazing. Easy to open, easy to hold, carry. It feels super sleek, soft almost, even though the material is aluminum. And I did see the 16-inch, and that almost felt like it was the size of the old, I think it was the 17-inch one that people call it the lunch table or lunch tray, the tray. And I really like the 14-inch. Maybe I need to see it one more time just to be sure. And that form factor and the overall system is pretty amazing. I put it through whatever tests I could in the demo mode, doing anything and everything to see if at any point it had any kind of struggles, and really nothing. Amazing. I did want to ask a question. I have a setup right now that has a machine that's still very relevant, works really hard. I think it's an i7, and big hard drive. It's a nice Mac. I usually get the top end in order to last it a lot longer. I think it's maybe 5 years old now, but I have two Thunderbolt ports that connect to DVIs to two Samsung monitors on my desk. I think the Samsung monitors are just 2K resolution, and I also have a USB hub that I connect in, like one of the large Apple keyboards. They don't actually sell separately anymore. And I wanted to see if I could bring this 14-inch into onto my desk. And I asked the Apple guys, how would I do that? How do I connect those monitors to the machine? And they were kind of stumped, third party. Well, you could hook one with HDMI, and I didn't really want to do all of that kind of work. So I thought, well, what is my step forward? And they recommended the LG monitors. And I'm like, that's pretty huge price tag for upgrading with a new Mac. So wanted to ask you if you had any thoughts on this transition topic. Thanks.
Hey, Gary. Yep, of course, I have some thoughts on that. Before we get to that, I just realized I forgot to make one other comment that I wanted to mention to Anthony about the notch and the menu bar issues. There's an app that I love and absolutely use called Bartender. It's Bartender 4, and it allows you to basically hide or get rid of some menu bar items, basically put them under a sub menu. So you can limit the number of menu bar items that are on the menu bar up at the top right, and you can set up different sets. You can switch between them. You can set up hotkeys for them. That really provides a solution where you don't have this massive number of things going across your entire menu bar. So you could potentially set up one just for iStat menus with a hotkey, and then you could toggle it on or off. I'm assuming you probably have that up there when you're doing high performance things on your Mac, so you can watch things like fan speed and probably the heat of the processors, maybe memory, that sort of stuff. Because I use iStat menus as well, but I just have it through the drop down. I don't put a bunch of the icons in the menu bar. But if you did, you could do that with Bartender 3 or Bartender 4 now. So that might be something worth looking into to help you out with that. Now, getting back to your questions, Gary, about connecting those older monitors to your Mac. I think you mentioned that those were Thunderbolt displays or mini DisplayPort displays, is I think more accurately. It uses the same connector. But yeah, a couple different ways that you could connect those to a new Mac, depending upon what resolution you are targeting. I actually have a similar situation or setup with my 16-inch MacBook Pro. I have just a HP 24-inch monitor that is a Thunderbolt display or a mini DisplayPort display, and I had been connecting that to my 15-inch just straight through the Thunderbolt connector. Now, with my new 16-inch MacBook Pro that has the USB-C style connectors, I just hook into a dock. I use the Anker dock, the 13-in-1. I forget specifically. It has a big long name, but I'll have a link to it in the show notes at maccast.com. And that just has a Thunderbolt connector on it. So I just plug the display right into that the same way I did into my old MacBook Pro. So that's one way you could go if you want to just have a hub. I find having a hub with the new Macs ideal because I get power everything through that connector. So I literally have one cable that I connect into, and I'm completely hooked up to my entire setup. So I find that very convenient. It's a little more pricey. If you want to go a cheaper route, I also have a Mac Mini that I use for my work, and on that, I just hook right into the USB-C connectors with an adapter. So my displays are actually DVI displays. So they have DVI, cables connected to them, and I have just a cheap, I think they're about $24 US mono price USB-C to DVI adapter that also has a USB-A connector and a USB-C pass-through connector on it. So those just plug right into the USB-C ports on my Mac and send out a DVI signal. So those are easy to connect. They actually make a cheaper version for about, I think, $14 US without the USB-A port. I'll have links to both of those in the show notes at maccast.com, so you can go that route. That works if your display is a single link, meaning that it's just the 1920 by 1080, basically 1080p resolution, maximum resolution. If you truly need like a dual link DVI display, that's like Apple's old 30-inch Cinema display where it would do a resolution of like 2560 by 1600. You can get an adapter for that, like a USB-C to dual link DVI adapter. These are much more expensive from what I can tell, probably around $80 to $150. StarTech makes one. I will have a link to that in the show notes at maccast.com. So I think the easiest way is just to get a USB-C to whatever kind of display adapter you need. And, searching a site like monoprice.com, which is where I get all my cables. They actually have great deals. Not a sponsor. I wish they were, because I love their stuff. But that's a way to go. And just some Googling and quick searching online. I'm surprised. I was going to say I'm surprised that the Apple Store tried to steer you to an LG display as an update and just didn't talk to you about getting some adapters. But that actually makes sense. I mean, they're there to sell you the stuff that the Apple Store sells, and that's the display that Apple pushes. So not surprising that's the route they would take with you. But yeah, just get a couple of display adapters and you should be totally fine, or a dock if you want to go that route. But thanks for sending in your comments, and I always appreciate your contributions to the show. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is something, and I'm not really sure how I missed this feature in iOS 15 until now, but I was doing something the other day. Well, here's the reality. We got a new kitten, or my daughter got a new kitten. And so we've been obviously taking a lot of pictures of it. They've been sharing those pictures with me on messages, and with the new Share for You, they're showing up in my photo library. So I was in my photo library scrolling through pictures, and I noticed there was a little icon of a cat paw that showed up on the image of the kitten. And I was like, wait, what is this? And it turns out it's a feature in iOS 15 called Visual Lookup. It's in Photos, and it basically uses the AI and neural engine on your iOS device to recognize the contents of photos, like the subjects that are in your photos, and allows you to get more information on those. It's based on, the search-based technology that Apple put in there a couple years ago, right? Where you can have it go through and identify items, objects, subjects that are in your photos, and then you can do searches in the Photos app to find those things. So if you do like a search for sunflowers, it'll give you all the photos with sunflowers in it. Or you do a search for mountains or beach or dog or cat or whatever that might be, a certain kind of animal, it will surface that and show it to you. So the extension of this now is you can actually get detailed information on objects that are recognized in your photos. So objects, landmarks, animals, books, plants, works of art. I know all of those things work right now. I'm not sure how deep this goes. I've seen those, but basically as you're browsing through the photos, or looking at the photos, this little icon might appear. Also, if you look down at the bottom at the little information icon, it will have a special little icon on it. Basically, this thing with, like, I'm calling it fairy dust, but basically little stars or little sparkles next to the info icon, and that indicates that it's recognized this and it has visual lookup information. So if you select a photo, check the little info icon at the bottom of the screen. If you see that little, fairy dust icon, that's an indication there's visual lookup information for it. And then you can tap that little icon that appears on the image to get more details. And what slides up is a panel that has additional detail with information that comes from Siri knowledge. It will show you similar images that it finds on the web, although I have found that not to be super accurate. So maybe they need to work on that one a little bit, and also offer up other online sources of information from places like Wikipedia. And beyond the similar images feature, I have found that, like, the information that it surfaces is pretty accurate. For example, with this new kitten, it knew the species it was, and that it was, a domestic long hair. And I've seen it have a little bit more trouble with my dog, which is just kind of a mutt. But, it does try to recognize and surface relevant information. And you can get, the type of species with plants. It's amazing. So if you have a nice clear shot of a flower or a tree or something like that, it'll recognize the type of plant it is and surface that information. It kind of really blew me away. And I had not seen this before. Again, I don't know how I missed it, but I figured if I missed it, maybe you might have missed it as well. So check this feature out, play around with it. Let me know what you think about it. I'd love to know about false positives. I did, after I found this, I did some online searching, and there's some pretty funny sort of posts and information from people who are saying, or who are showing examples where, it recognized the animal and it's a deer, but it's saying it's a dog breed or something like that. So it definitely probably needs some work, and it will get better over time as it learns more and more, but just another great application of the AI and really leveraging the neural engine technology and stuff that we have in these Apple processors now. And it's really cool. It's like living in the future, and it's a lot of fun. So check that out. Let me know what you think. But with that, that is going to do it for this episode of MacCast. Before I leave you, I do want to thank my show sponsor, Smile, makers of TextExpander. You can check out more information on TextExpander by visiting textexpander.com/podcast. Bandwidth for the MacCast is provided by CashFly. You can find them at CACHEFLY.com, and all advertising on the MacCast is handled by Backbeat Media. They are at backbeatmedia.com. As always, I love hearing from you. If you have a comment, a question, something you'd like to hear covered on a future episode of the MacCast, you can send your emails and audio comments to maccast@gmail.com. You're also welcome to call in on the listener hotline, and that phone number, 281-622-4269, 281-MAC-IM9, and you can leave a voicemail. If you need show notes, links to anything that I talked about on this or any other episode of MacCast, you'll find those on the website. That's at maccast.com. And finally, if you want to follow me on social media, you can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/MacCast, or you can check out the MacCast Facebook page over at facebook.com/TheMacCast, or find me on Instagram, just MacCast on Instagram. But that will do it for now. Until next time, I will talk to you all again real soon.